Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The historical data, cinematic case studies, and cultural analyses presented in this video are for educational and entertainment purposes only. This content does not constitute legal advice, marital counseling, or professional consulting of any kind. The historical trends discussed regarding early 20th century jurisprudence, matrimonial law, and social customs do not reflect current statutory frameworks or legal standards. Viewers should conduct their own due diligence and consult with licensed professionals regarding any contemporary legal, financial, or personal matters. In the winter of 1918, as the world emerged from the devastation of the First World War, American theatergoers lined up around block corners in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, not to witness a patriotic war epic or a slapstick comedy, but to witness an act that was considered a profound threat to the fabric of civilization. They paid their hard-earned dimes to watch a married couple systematically destroy their vows on a giant silver screen. This was the release of Cecil B. DeMille's groundbreaking silent feature, Old Wives for New. At a time when obtaining a divorce in states like New York required proving heinous acts of adultery in an open court of law, often involving hired private investigators and staged photographs of infidelity, Hollywood did something truly radical. It framed the dissolution of a marriage not as a moral failing or a ticket to eternal damnation, but as a legitimate, transforming journey toward personal fulfillment. This cinematic shift triggered an immediate, high-stakes cultural war. Religious organizations weaponized local censorship boards, demanding that these films be banned, claiming they would completely dismantle the American family structure. Shocking statistical shifts backed up their fears. Between 1890 and 1920, the United States divorce rate increased by nearly 15% per capita, a historic trend that alarmed traditionalists and fascinated sociologists. The media was accused of actively encouraging spouses to abandon their households. Yet, despite the protests, the films drew record-breaking crowds. What did early Hollywood executives discover about the changing psychology of American romance that the rest of society was too terrified to admit? How did a medium born in urban immigrant Nickelodeons manage to rewrite the entire script of American intimacy, turning the social stigma of a broken home into a highly profitable, glamorous narrative arc? The answer involves a hidden cultural blueprint engineered by early filmmakers, a blueprint that continues to dictate how we view heartbreak, autonomy, and the pursuit of happiness today. There is a direct, unbroken line connecting the silent melodramas of the 1910s to the modern reality television empires and blockbuster divorce dramas of the 21st century. To truly understand this phenomenon, we must examine the specific case studies of the era, beginning with how early cinema visualized marital decay. In Old Wives for New, DeMille did not rely on standard theatrical villains. Instead, he presented a highly realistic, agonizing look at domestic neglect. The film introduces Charles Murdoch, a wealthy businessman, and his wife Sophie. Over years of marriage, Sophie has stopped caring for her appearance and her intellect, becoming complacent and dismissive, while Charles remains ambitious and refined. The film utilizes tight, restrictive close-ups of their shared breakfast table, visually trapping the characters in a prison of their own making. This was a massive departure from early cinematic shorts, which typically treated marriage as an immutable, sacred bond that could only be broken by the tragedy of death. By showing the step-by-step psychological alienation of the couple, DeMille forced the audience to empathize with the desire for escape. When Charles eventually seeks companionship elsewhere, and the couple pursues a separation, the narrative does not punish them. Instead, the potential outcomes of their separation are presented as liberating. Charles finds a partner who matches his ambition, and Sophie is shocked out of her complacency, reclaiming her independence and dignity. This was a complete inversion of traditional Victorian literature, where the divorced woman was invariably cast out into the wilderness or driven to suicide. This cinematic rewriting of the marital contract directly collided with the harsh realities of early 20th century law. During this era, the United States operated under a strict fault-based divorce system. To secure a legal separation, one party had to be proven completely guilty of a specific statutory offense, such as cruelty, desertion, or adultery, while the other party had to be completely innocent. This created a massive legal bottleneck and gave rise to the infamous Reno divorce colony in Nevada. Because Nevada required a mere 6-month residency period to file for divorce under far more lenient grounds, thousands of wealthy Americans, particularly women, migrated to Reno, living in specialized ranches for half a year just to secure their freedom. Hollywood capitalized on this real-world phenomenon by creating an entirely new cinematic subgenre, the Reno divorce film. These narratives transformed what was a deeply shameful, exhausting legal ordeal into an exotic, transformative rite of passage. Characters were shown boarding trains to the West, shedding their restrictive Eastern societal expectations, and returning as modernized, liberated individuals. The screenwriters of early cinema effectively took a grueling legal loophole and repackaged it as the ultimate luxury journey of self-actualization. This brings us to the core promise of this masterclass series, and the exact problem it solves for you today. We live in a culture that is deeply saturated with media narratives about relationships. We are constantly bombarded with advice, representations, and cultural scripts telling us how love should look when a relationship is considered a failure, and how we should navigate the aftermath of a breakup. We often assume that our modern anxieties about romance, our high expectations for personal happiness within a partnership, and the legal and emotional complexities of modern divorce are unique to our contemporary digital age. However, by deep diving into the foundational years of American cinema, you will discover that the way you conceptualize relationship transitions was actively manufactured over a century ago. The cinematic pioneers of the silent era were the original architects of our modern romantic expectations. They were the ones who shifted the American collective consciousness away from the institutional model of marriage, which prioritized economic stability and social duty, and steered it directly toward the companionate model of marriage, which demands perpetual emotional compatibility and personal growth. Through this historical investigation, you will gain an entirely new, sophisticated lens to analyze the media you consume every day. You will begin to see how modern entertainment continues to use the exact same narrative mechanisms, character archetypes, and visual cues established by silent filmmakers to shape public opinion on legal disputes, gender roles, and family structures. By understanding the historical trends, the institutional pushback, and the creative breakthroughs of early U.S. cinema, you will no longer be a passive consumer of romantic narratives. Instead, you will possess the critical tools necessary to decode the hidden social engineering behind the depiction of the divorce journey, allowing you to better understand the evolution of the American family and the enduring power of the moving image. To understand how this social engineering functioned on a practical level, we must examine the specific narrative formulas early filmmakers invented to make divorce palatable to a deeply conservative American public. The primary challenge facing major film studios in the late 1910s and early 1920s was navigating the highly fragmented landscape of state and local censorship boards. If a film simply depicted a woman obtaining a divorce, finding immediate happiness, and remaining single, local censorship boards in states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Kansas would completely ban the film from being exhibited. The financial potential outcomes of a multi-state ban were catastrophic for early film distributors. To bypass this barrier, directors developed a sophisticated narrative loophole, known to film historians as the comedy of remarriage. This structural template allowed filmmakers to explore the entire, messy journey of marital dissolution, while technically satisfying the moral demands of the era, by reuniting the couple before the final curtain dropped. A definitive case study of this mechanism is Cecil B. DeMille's 1919 silent feature, Don't Change Your Husband, starring Gloria Swanson as Layla Porter. The film operates as a step-by-step manual on the psychological erosion of a 20th century marriage. The narrative begins by establishing the mundane, soul-crushing reality of Layla's domestic life with her husband, James Denby Porter. DeMille uses specific, micro-level visual cues to build empathy for Layla's plight. James is depicted as a man completely consumed by his financial pursuits, routinely reading the stock market pages at the dinner table, leaving his clothes scattered across the bedroom floor, and unceremoniously chewing green onions during intimate conversations. The camera frequently captures Swanson's expressions of profound alienation through tight medium shots, emphasizing her isolation within her own home. When Layla finally demands a divorce, the film does not frame it as a sudden hysterical reaction, but rather as a calculated, necessary step toward self-preservation. The narrative then tracks her journey through the legal system and into the arms of a new suitor, the glamorous and attentive Skylar Van Zutphen. However, the true ideological brilliance of the film lies in its second half. Layla discovers that her new husband is actually far worse than her first. He is a superficial spendthrift and an unfaithful partner. Meanwhile, her first husband, shocked by the divorce, undergoes a complete physical and social transformation, shedding his bad habits and reclaiming his charm. The film concludes with Layla divorcing her second husband and remarrying her first. By utilizing this complex double divorce plot, DeMille achieved two contradictory goals simultaneously. He gave the audience a highly detailed, titillating look at the entire process of breaking a marriage contract, while providing a conservative resolution that reaffirmed the ultimate sanctity of the original marital bond. Imagine an average American citizen today in the year 2026 named Robert. If Robert wants to understand the dynamics of a modern relationship breakdown, he can easily open any social media application or streaming platform and witness hundreds of creators documenting their separations in real time. Robert can watch vloggers film their packing processes, explain their custody arrangements, and detail their emotional healing journeys. For Robert in 2026, the visualization of a relationship ending is entirely common, almost mundane. Now, imagine shifting your perspective back to an average theatergoer in 1919 walking into a grand movie palace. For that viewer, seeing a woman actively reject her husband, hire legal counsel, and successfully navigate a separation on a massive silver screen was a shocking, unprecedented experience. It was the historical equivalent of a psychological earthquake. Cinema was providing a visual vocabulary for desires that everyday citizens had been taught to suppress. This cinematic vocabulary was heavily reinforced by historical trends in production design and consumer culture. Early U.S. cinema did not just show the emotional journey of divorce, it commercialized it. In these films, the divorced woman was consistently styled in the most avant-garde, luxurious fashions of the day. Costumes designed by legendary figures like Mitchell Layson transformed the legal status of being divorced from a social death sentence into the ultimate marker of modern sophistication and wealth. When Gloria Swanson's character completes her divorce, her wardrobe shifts from conservative, restrictive house dresses to extravagant, loose-fitting silk gowns and elaborate headdresses. This visual transformation sent a clear, subconscious message to the audience. Freeing oneself from an unhappy marriage was the ultimate act of modern consumer luxury and personal refinement. The impact of these films is further demonstrated by the statistical realities of the period. Historical trends show that as the volume of these relationship-driven features increased, the social demographics of the United States began to shift rapidly. By the mid-1920s, cities like Los Angeles and Chicago were reporting record numbers of legal separations, and the median age of individuals filing for divorce was dropping significantly. Sociologists of the era frequently pointed to the movie theater as a primary catalyst for this shift, arguing that young women were modeling their expectations of romance and marital satisfaction directly after the behavior of silent screen icons. The films were actively breaking down the traditional Victorian notion that a woman's primary duty was endurance within a dysfunctional household. Furthermore, early cinema began to tackle the profound double standards embedded in American matrimonial law. In many states during the early 20th century, a husband's infidelity was often legally excused or minimized, while a single instance of proven infidelity by a wife resulted in the immediate forfeiture of her property rights, her alimony, and her children. Filmmakers began to use the medium to expose and critique these systemic inequalities. Through the strategic use of narrative irony and melodramatic staging, silent dramas forced audiences to confront the hypocrisy of a legal system that penalized women for seeking the exact same personal and sexual autonomy that men took for granted. The structural sophistication of these early films laid the groundwork for an entirely new era of storytelling. Studios realized that the depiction of the divorce journey was not just a passing fad. It was a goldmine that guaranteed massive box office returns and sustained audience engagement. Writers and directors began pushing the boundaries of what could be shown on screen, moving away from the safety net of the remarriage plot and venturing into far more realistic, uncompromising territory. They began to ask tougher questions about the economic survival of divorced women, the psychological impact on children, and the cold institutional reality of the American legal apparatus. But just as Hollywood was mastering the art of the sophisticated relationship drama, a massive technological and political shift was brewing on the horizon. The introduction of synchronized sound synchronized with the image was about to change the mechanics of cinematic storytelling forever, giving characters a literal voice to debate the merits of marriage and freedom. Simultaneously, a growing coalition of conservative religious groups and political figures was organizing an unprecedented counteroffensive designed to completely sanitize the silver screen and crush this burgeoning cinematic revolution. How did filmmakers adapt when their characters could suddenly speak their scandalous desires aloud? And what happened when the federal government threatened to step in and regulate the industry? As we move into the next phase of this masterclass, we will examine the explosive arrival of the talkies and the desperate, high-stakes battle over the implementation of the infamous Hollywood production code, a system designed to silence the divorce journey entirely. The introduction of synchronized sound completely revolutionized how relationships were dissected on screen. Talkies meant that filmmakers no longer had to rely on exaggerated facial expressions or simplistic title cards to convey marital discord. Characters could now use sharp, cynical, and highly realistic dialogue to rip their marriages apart in real time. This technological leap ushered in the legendary pre-code era, a brief window between 1930 and 1934 when Hollywood operated with unprecedented creative freedom, pushing the depiction of the divorce journey into raw, unvarnished territory. Without the restrictions of silence, the emotional architecture of a failing marriage could be explored with a level of psychological nuance that shocked traditionalists and captivated urban audiences. A definitive case study of this era is the 1930 landmark feature, The Divorcee, starring Norma Shearer as Jerry Martin. The film acts as a brutal step-by-step deconstruction of the marital double standards plaguing early 20th century American society. The narrative ignites when Jerry discovers that her husband, Ted, has engaged in a brief, casual affair. When she confronts him, expecting remorse, Ted dismisses the incident as a meaningless lapse, arguing that a man's physical infidelity does not impact his emotional commitment to the marriage. Jerry, refusing to accept this hypocritical logic, decides to level the playing field by having an affair of her own with Ted's closest friend. When she reveals this to her husband, demonstrating that she has exercised the exact same freedom he claimed, Ted is incapable of handling the inversion of the gender dynamic. The double standard collapses under its own weight, and the marriage dissolves into a bitter legal separation. What made The Divorcee so revolutionary was its refusal to punish the divorced woman. Instead of framing Jerry's post-divorce life as a tragic descent into social ruin, the film tracks her journey as an exploration of absolute financial, sexual, and emotional independence. She travels to Europe, associates with an elite social circle, and openly embraces her autonomy without offering a single apology to society. The film utilizes sophisticated Art Deco set designs and glamorous lighting to associate her new status with progress and liberation. Norma Shearer won an Academy Award for her performance, demonstrating that the public was deeply receptive to these modernized relationship dynamics. The talkies allowed for verbal sparring that mirrored the rising sophistication of urban Americans, using the auditory elements of cinema to make the cold calculation of divorce lawyers and the whispers of a judgmental courtroom feel visceral to the audience. Imagine if a modern media consumer in the current year 2026 named Sarah watched a contemporary television series where a divorced protagonist was forced by an external regulatory board to spend every episode weeping in isolation, stripped of her career, and legally penalized just to satisfy a religious group. Sarah would find it completely absurd, an archaic violation of artistic freedom that completely misrepresents the potential outcomes of real-world relationships. Yet, this exact scenario was the impending reality for Hollywood studios in the early 1930s. The radical freedom of the pre-code era triggered a massive organized counteroffensive from traditionalist institutions. Historical trends of the early 1930s show a nation gripped by the economic devastation of the Great Depression. As financial structures crumbled, conservative political and religious organizations clung even harder to traditional family models, viewing the rising independence of cinematic divorcees as a direct threat to national stability. Organizations like the Catholic Legion of Decency formed, mobilizing millions of citizens to threaten nationwide boycotts of movie theaters that exhibited films containing what they deemed immoral lifestyles. Divorce occupied the absolute top of their censorship hit list. While Will Hayes, the head of the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, had introduced a set of moral guidelines in 1930, studios had routinely ignored them because scandalous relationship-driven dramas generated massive box office returns during a desperate economic crisis. That era of corporate defiance ended abruptly in July 1934, with the appointment of Joseph Breen as the head of the newly empowered Production Code Administration. Breen was granted absolute authority to review every single script, rough cut, and finished film before it could be legally distributed to American theaters. The Production Code was no longer a set of polite suggestions. It became an ironclad law backed by severe financial penalties. The code explicitly mandated that the sanctity of the institution of marriage must be upheld at all times. It decreed that cinematic narratives must never treat divorce as a positive, justifiable, or attractive option. If a plot absolutely required a legal separation to function, the entire process had to be visualized as a tragic, deeply painful mistake. Furthermore, the screenwriters were forced to ensure that any character responsible for initiating a divorce suffered severe narrative consequences, such as financial ruin, permanent loneliness, or social exile, by the time the final credits rolled. This structural censorship fundamentally altered the mechanics of Hollywood screenwriting overnight. Case studies of films produced immediately after 1934 reveal a systematic sanitization of human relationships. Writers could no longer pen scripts where a woman walked away from an unfaithful husband and found peace. Instead, the narrative was forced to pathologize her choice, portraying her as manipulative, emotionally unstable, or deeply misguided, while the intact nuclear family was elevated as the only acceptable path to psychological health. The complex, mature legal and emotional journeys that filmmakers had spent 15 years perfecting were effectively outlawed, forcing the industry to adapt or face financial extinction. But Hollywood's creative minds refused to be completely silenced by the red ink of Joseph Breen's censorship office. Forced into a corner by the absolute authority of the Production Code Administration, brilliant screenwriters and directors realized that if they could no longer openly discuss or visualize the raw realities of marital breakdown, they would have to invent a completely new, highly sophisticated, and subversive cinematic language to smuggle these forbidden themes directly past the censors. This environment of creative desperation gave birth to one of the most brilliant, witty, and covert genres in cinematic history. Directors realized they could bypass the strict rules by using rapid-fire dialogue, absurd physical comedy, and hidden psychological symbols to make films that were ostensibly about the beauty of marriage, but were secretly step-by-step masterclasses in the art of separation. How did these filmmakers manage to satisfy the censors while still delivering radical messages about relationship autonomy to the public? As we move into the next phase of this masterclass, we will uncover the covert world of the screwball comedy, analyzing the hidden codes used to turn the battle of the sexes into a cinematic revolution. The manifestation of this creative resistance found its home in the screwball comedy, a genre that treated the battlefield of marital discord with lightning-fast pacing, aristocratic absurdity, and deeply subversive subtext. Screenwriters quickly realized that while Joseph Breen and the Production Code Administration could easily censor overt discussions of sexual incompatibility or straightforward legal dissolutions, they were virtually powerless against the weaponization of irony, satire, and rapid-fire dialogue. The screwball comedy took the core elements of the forbidden divorce journey and masked them behind a facade of chaotic, high-society romance. By presenting couples who were clearly mismatched, highly combative, and actively seeking separation, filmmakers managed to critique the rigidity of institutional marriage while technically remaining compliant with the letter of the law. A definitive case study in this masterclass of cinematic subversion is Leo McCarey's 1937 masterpiece, The Awful Truth, featuring Cary Grant as Jerry Warner and Irene Dunne as Lucy Warner. The film wastes no time establishing its cynical view of marital fidelity. In the opening sequence, Jerry is shown pretending to return from a tropical vacation, sporting a fake tan from a sun lamp, while Lucy returns late from an evening spent with her handsome music teacher after her car supposedly broke down. Rather than engaging in a dramatic, sorrowful confrontation as mandated by the spirit of the production code, the characters engage in a sophisticated, passive-aggressive verbal duel. Their mutual suspicion quickly leads them to a modern, mutual decision to secure a divorce. However, McCarey brilliantly incorporates the actual legal realities of the era into the narrative structure to create an extended zone of comedic anarchy. The judge grants the divorce but enforces a mandatory 90-day interlocutory period before the decree becomes absolute. This 90-day window acts as the narrative playground for the entire film. Instead of showing the characters descending into the mandatory depression required by censorship guidelines, the film visualizes this waiting period as an intense, highly competitive courtship dance in reverse. Jerry and Lucy spend the duration of their legal separation actively sabotaging each other's potential new romantic relationships. One of the most step-by-step examples of subversion occurs during the custody battle sequence, which focuses not on a child, but on their wire-haired fox terrier, Mr. Smith. McCarey uses the dog as a transparent, highly satirical surrogate for a child custody dispute. In the courtroom, Lucy wins custody of the dog, but the judge grants Jerry specific visitation rights. When Jerry arrives at Lucy's opulent apartment to exercise these rights, the interactions between the estranged spouses are charged with unresolved romantic tension and biting sarcasm. The dog becomes a physical prop used to manipulate proximity and force interactions. By substituting a pet for a child, The filmmakers successfully bypassed the code's prohibition against making family dissolution look appealing or trivial, while simultaneously showing the audience that the emotional bond between the divorced couple is far from dead. Imagine if a contemporary citizen in the current year 2026 named Michael decided to dissolve his marriage. Michael would likely interact with a digitized legal framework, filing electronic documents, separating assets via calculated mediation algorithms, and navigating a relatively streamlined administrative process. For Michael in 2026, the emotional fallout might be severe, but the structural pathway is clearly defined and widely accepted by his peers. Now, imagine the perspective of an audience member in 1937. For that viewer, seeing a wealthy, glamorous couple treat the sacred institution of marriage as a game of strategic wit was completely mind-bending. The film was demonstrating that the period of divorce did not have to be characterized by social exile. Instead, it could be a period of immense personal power, social mobility, and playful autonomy. To further outsmart the literal-minded censors, early sound directors perfected the technique of overlapping dialogue. In traditional cinema, characters spoke in clean, alternating turns, allowing censors to read the script line by line to detect moral infractions. Screwball directors like Howard Hawks accelerated the delivery of speech to a breakneck tempo, causing characters to interrupt each other, speak simultaneously, and bury double entendres beneath a wall of sonic velocity. In films like His Girl Friday, released in 1940, which tracks the frantic professional and romantic relationship between a newspaper editor and his star reporter ex-wife, the dialogue moves at an estimated 240 words per minute. This acoustic speed trap meant that the audience and the censors processed the emotional reality of the ex-spouse's unbreakable intellectual connection long before they could analyze the moral propriety of a woman rejecting a traditional domestic life with her new fiancé. The structural brilliance of these films is reflected in the historical trends of late 1930s box office receipts. Studios discovered that these sophisticated relationship comedies consistently outperformed traditional melodramas in major urban markets. The American public, weary from years of economic hardship, gravitated toward stories that validated their own internal desires for flexibility, reinvention, and escape from rigid social roles. The screwball comedy provided a vital psychological safety valve, allowing viewers to laugh at the absurdity of marital expectations, while absorbing the underlying message that a legal contract should not dictate human happiness. This era of filmmaking also fundamentally redefined the presentation of gender dynamics during a breakup. Under the strict interpretation of the production code, a divorced woman was supposed to be a cautionary tale. Yet, in screwball comedies, the female protagonist is invariably the most intelligent, resourceful, and articulate person in the room. In The Awful Truth, when Lucy realizes Jerry is planning to marry an aristocratic heiress, she infiltrates a high-society dinner party at the heiress's estate, pretending to be Jerry's unrefined, nightclub performer sister. Through a step-by-step performance of deliberate social embarrassment, she completely destroys his prospects with the conservative family. This sequence showcases a divorced woman exercising total narrative control, using her wit to dismantle the upper-class structures that sought to contain her ex-husband. She is not a victim of her marital status, she is the master of it. By the dawn of the 1940s, Hollywood had successfully used the screwball genre to normalize the concept of marital transition, proving that the journey through separation could be a source of profound self-discovery and ultimate renewal. Directors had systematically trained the American public to read between the lines, to look for the truth in a lingering glance or a sarcastic remark, rather than the explicit moral declarations demanded by the Production Code Administration. But this era of lighthearted subversion and penthouse warfare was about to collide with a massive, unavoidable global cataclysm. As the United States entered World War II, the social landscape transformed overnight. Millions of men were deployed overseas, women flooded into the industrial workforce, and the sudden intense strain on the domestic front caused actual wartime divorce rates to skyrocket to unprecedented heights. The luxury penthouses and playful antics of the screwball comedy suddenly felt completely detached from the grim realities of a nation at war. The collective psychological mood of the country darkened, and filmmakers were forced to abandon the whimsical remarriage plot for something far more sinister, realistic, and dangerous. How did cinema respond when the divorce journey ceased to be a witty game of romantic strategy and instead became a lethal psychological trap? As we transition into the next phase of this masterclass, we will enter the shadows of post-war film noir, where the unhappy spouse trades sarcastic barbs for a deadly weapon, giving rise to the iconic lethal archetype of the femme fatale. The emergence of film noir in the mid-1940s reflected a profound psychological fracture in the American collective consciousness. The playful, sophisticated banter of the Depression-era screwball comedies evaporated as the nation faced the harsh, destabilizing realities of the post-World War II landscape. Millions of American servicemen returned home from the battlefields of Europe and the Pacific to find a domestic front that had permanently changed. Women had entered the industrial workforce in unprecedented numbers, experiencing financial independence, geographic mobility, and a new sense of social autonomy. When the institutional pressure to return to traditional pre-war gender roles intensified, the domestic sphere became a pressure cooker. Historical trends from this specific era show an explosive spike in actual marital dissolutions, with the United States divorce rate hitting a massive historic peak in 1946. Yet, while society was fracturing in real time, the Production Code Administration under Joseph Breen maintained its ironclad grip on Hollywood scripts, adamantly refusing to allow filmmakers to depict a clean, amicable, or liberating divorce journey. This created a profound artistic bottleneck. If a screenwriter could not legally or morally show a character securing a streamlined exit from an unhappy marriage without facing severe narrative punishment, the frustration had to manifest in a far more volatile manner. In the shadow-drenched world of film noir, the divorce journey was violently warped into a criminal conspiracy, and the courtroom was replaced by a crime scene. Marriage was no longer visualized as a temporary inconvenience. It was a lethal prison, and the only path to freedom was murder. This structural shift gave rise to the iconic archetype of the femme fatale, a character who is frequently misunderstood by contemporary audiences as a merely malicious seductress. In reality, when viewed through the lens of early 20th century matrimonial law, the femme fatale is a direct, radical symptom of a rigid legal and social apparatus that denied women an equitable exit from domestic captivity. Under the strict, fault-based legal systems operating in the vast majority of American states at the time, a woman seeking a divorce risked losing everything. If she could not prove egregious physical cruelty or open abandonment, she faced the potential outcomes of total financial ruin, the complete forfeiture of her property rights, and the devastating loss of child custody. A definitive case study of this legal and psychological claustrophobia is Billy Wilder's 1944 cinematic masterpiece, Double Indemnity. The film introduces us to Phyllis Dietrich's son, played with cold, calculated precision by Barbara Stanwyck. Phyllis is trapped in a sterile, loveless marriage to an overbearing, wealthy oil executive in Los Angeles. Wilder utilizes specific, deliberate visual choices to communicate her absolute domestic confinement. When the insurance salesman, Walter Neff, first enters the Dietrich son home, the interior is heavily shadowed, with low-key chiaroscuro lighting casting the distinct patterns of Venetian blinds across the walls and furniture. These lines look exactly like prism bars, a recurring visual motif in film noir that explicitly communicates the captivity of the mid-century housewife. Phyllis does not even attempt to navigate the corrupt and invasive legal system to obtain a divorce. She understands that under California law, a standard separation would leave her with a meager pittance of alimony and complete social ostracization. Instead, she identifies a highly lucrative, extra-legal alternative. She manipulates Walter Neff into helping her orchestrate the perfect murder of her husband, framing the death as a train accident to trigger a double indemnity clause on a secret life insurance policy. The step-by-step planning of this murder functions as a dark, twisted inversion of asset division. Rather than negotiating a settlement through attorneys, Phyllis and Walter use the mechanics of the insurance industry to secure her financial independence. Imagine if a contemporary American citizen in the current year 2026 named Jessica found herself trapped in a deeply unfulfilling, emotionally stagnant marriage. For Jessica in 2026, the pathway to independence is clear, transparent, and entirely institutionalized. She can easily consult with a family law mediator, utilize online filing platforms to submit documents for a no-fault divorce, and rely on established statutory frameworks to guarantee an equitable division of marital property. The concept of resorting to physical violence to escape a domestic contract seems entirely archaic and pathological to her. But for a theatergoer in 1944, the desperate, lethal calculation of Phyllis Dietrich's son resonated on a deeply subliminal level. The film exposed the subterranean current of rage flowing beneath the manicured lawns of American suburbs, demonstrating that the preservation of an artificial marriage could drive individuals to absolute madness. Another profound case study from this era is Tay Garnett's 1946 adaptation of The Postman Always Rings Twice, starring Lana Turner as Cora Smith. Cora is a young, ambitious woman married to Nick Papadakis, an older, complacent man who owns a dusty, isolated roadside diner. Cora's desperation for autonomy is visualized through her wardrobe and styling. She is presented almost exclusively in pristine, blindingly white outfits that contrast sharply with the grime of the diner and the moral rot of her circumstances. Cora explicitly states her dilemma to her lover, Frank Chambers. She hates her husband, she hates the diner, but she refuses to walk away with nothing. A legal divorce would strip her of the economic security she surrendered her youth to achieve. The narrative progresses step by step through their failed attempts to stage a fatal domestic accident, culminating in a brutal car crash that claims Nick's life. However, because Hollywood operated under the watchful eye of the production code, these cinematic explorations of marital homicide could never be allowed to validate the crimes of their protagonists. The censors enforced a strict policy of retributive justice. Consequently, film noir narratives are structured as tragic downward spirals. After successfully eliminating their spouses, both Phyllis Dietrich's son and Cora Smith are systematically destroyed by their own paranoia, guilt, and the relentless machinery of the state. In Double Indemnity, Phyllis and Walter inevitably turn on each other in a dark living room, trading gunshots instead of vows, leaving both characters bleeding out in the dark. By forcing these characters to suffer the most extreme potential outcomes for their actions, the Production Code Administration believed they were deterring audiences from subverting the sanctity of marriage. What the censors failed to realize, however, was that the public was not focusing on the mandatory moralistic endings of these films. Instead, historical trends show that audiences were deeply captivated by the middle sections of the narratives, where women exercised total control, outsmarted patriarchal authority figures, and openly expressed their disdain for domestic servitude. The films provided a radical, vicarious release for millions of viewers who felt similarly constrained by the rigid social expectations of the post-war era. By the end of the 1940s, film noir had completely demystified the idealized American home, exposing it as a potential breeding ground for crime, resentment, and psychological decay. The genre had successfully taken the hidden anxieties of the divorce journey and blown them up into high-stakes, cinematic tragedies of cosmic proportions. But as the calendar turned to a new decade, the landscape of American society was about to undergo another seismic transformation. The 1950s heralded the arrival of the mass-produced suburbs, the explosive growth of the baby boom, and a powerful new technology that threatened to destroy the Hollywood studio system entirely: the television set. To fight back against this domestic competitor, movie studios had to completely reinvent their strategy, trading the dark, cynical shadows of noir for vibrant, widescreen technicolor. How did filmmakers adapt the depiction of the divorce journey when they were forced to move out of the urban shadows and into the bright, manicured lawns of suburban paradise? As we advance into the next phase of this masterclass, we will explore the glossy, high-budget world of 1950s melodrama, where the battle over the marriage contract moved into the realm of mid-century consumerism and technicolor desperation. The shifting topography of the American landscape in the 1950s forced Hollywood to completely reimagine the visual grammar of domestic unhappiness. The end of the war had triggered an unprecedented migration away from urban centers and into mass-produced suburban developments like Levittown. This geographic shift was accompanied by an intense ideological push to restore traditional nuclear family structures, resulting in the baby boom and a cultural narrative that equated suburban homeownership with absolute human fulfillment. Simultaneously, the Hollywood studio system faced an existential crisis. The rapid proliferation of television sets across American living rooms was draining theater audiences at an alarming rate. To survive, movie studios had to offer an experience that television's small, black and white screen could not replicate. They invested heavily in widescreen formats like CinemaScope and advanced, hypersaturated Technicolor processes. When applied to the theme of marital dissolution, these technological innovations yielded a fascinating paradox. The Production Code Administration under Joseph Breen was still actively enforcing its strict regulations, prohibiting any straightforward endorsement of divorce. Consequently, filmmakers could not easily show a clean institutional separation. Instead, they utilized the immense scale of the widescreen canvas and the psychological power of intense color palettes to construct the mid-century melodrama. In these films, the journey toward divorce was relocated from the gritty, shadow-filled urban alleys of film noir directly into the bright, immaculately manicured lawns of suburban paradise. The widescreen did not represent freedom. It became a magnifying glass that exposed the profound isolation, consumerist conformity, and emotional desperation trapping the modern American spouse. A definitive case study of this transition is George Cukor's 1952 classic, The Marrying Kind. The film is structurally revolutionary because it uses the literal framework of a legal divorce proceeding as its primary narrative mechanism. The story opens not in a home, but inside the austere office of a New York City domestic relations court judge. A young couple, Florence and Chet Kiefer, played by Judy Holliday and Aldo Ray, are on the verge of finalizing their separation. As the judge interviews them trying to understand how a seemingly loving marriage collapsed, the narrative progresses step by step through a series of complex flashbacks. Cukor masterfully subverts the expectations of the audience by contrasting what the characters say in the courtroom with the gritty reality of what actually occurred in their lives. The flashbacks reveal a slow, agonizing accumulation of micro-traumas. We see the financial claustrophobia of their cramped apartment, the professional stagnation of Chet's blue-collar job, and the gradual erosion of their communication. The true turning point of their marital decay occurs during a highly detailed, devastating sequence where their young son tragically drowns during a summer outing. Cukor uses long shots to emphasize the physical distance that opens up between the grieving parents on the beach. Following this tragedy, the marriage becomes an empty shell, characterized by bitter, passive-aggressive arguments over trivial household expenses and domestic chores. By using the formal setting of a divorce court to anchor the entire film, The Marrying Kind forced audiences to confront the cold, institutional reality of marital failure, demonstrating that love could be systematically dismantled by the ordinary, crushing pressures of modern economic life. Imagine an average American citizen in the current year 2026 named David. If David recognizes that his marriage has entered a state of irreversible emotional stagnation, his pathway to resolution is highly institutionalized, transparent, and socially supported. David can access specialized family mediation mobile applications, participate in virtual couples therapy sessions from his laptop, and ultimately utilize no-fault divorce statutes to achieve an equitable distribution of property without destroying his social standing or professional career. For David in 2026, a relationship ending is a personal and logistical challenge, not an absolute social erasure. Now, compare David to a corporate executive living in the year 1955. For that individual, the mere rumor of a pending divorce meant immediate professional catastrophe. It resulted in immediate blacklisting from conservative corporate structures, total excommunication from local country clubs, and permanent social ostracization within the neighborhood. The 1950s corporate ecosystem demanded a flawless performance of domestic stability as a prerequisite for financial advancement, forcing couples to endure profound psychological torment to protect their economic survival. This environment of enforced conformity was brilliantly dissected by director Douglas Sirk, whose masterclass melodramas like Written on the Wind, released in 1956, exposed the toxic rot festering beneath the glossy surface of upper-class American marriages. Sirk did not rely on subtle realism. Instead, he pioneered a style of hypermelodrama that used the visual elements of the frame to communicate what the characters were forbidden to say aloud. In Written on the Wind, the marriage between Kyle Hadley, a wealthy oil heir, and Lucy Moore is a study in psychological devastation. Sirk systematically fills the frame with mirrors, reflective polished wood surfaces, and massive glass windows. The characters are constantly forced to look at their own reflections, emphasizing their acute self-consciousness and the artificiality of their lives. Sirk's use of Technicolor was deliberately aggressive. Rather than using color to make the environment look natural, he utilized clashing primary colors to represent the internal bleeding of the relationship. When Kyle's alcoholism and deep-seated insecurities cause the marriage to fracture, Lucy is frequently framed against blood-red curtains or trapped in sterile, ice-blue bedrooms. The physical objects within the house, from the high-end modernist furniture to the brand-new luxury sports cars parked in the driveway, are treated not as symbols of wealth, but as heavy, suffocating instruments of domestic warfare. The characters are completely paralyzed by their own consumer abundance, illustrating a distinct historical trend of the 1950s, the desperate attempt to substitute material accumulation for authentic emotional intimacy. Historical data from this decade reveals that while the official divorce rate appeared to stabilize superficially after the historic spike of 1946, this plateau did not indicate a sudden return to marital harmony. Instead, it reflected the intense social and economic penalties associated with legal separation. This was the precise historical era that witnessed the explosive rise of Milltown, the first blockbuster pharmaceutical tranquilizer, which was marketed aggressively to suburban housewives to help them chemically manage their domestic anxiety and resentment. Early U.S. cinema captured this underlying sedation, showing a world where characters walked through beautiful high-budget sets while carrying a profound unspoken despair. By the late 1950s, the rigid moral consensus that had sustained the Production Code Administration for over 2 decades was beginning to fracture under the weight of these artistic and social pressures. Audiences were becoming increasingly sophisticated, and independent filmmakers were starting to bypass the studio system entirely, demanding the right to depict human relationships with absolute, unvarnished honesty. The glossy Technicolor masquerade of the suburban melodrama had pushed the emotional reality of the divorce journey as far as it could go within the boundaries of censorship. The dam was about to burst. As the United States transitioned into the turbulent decade of the 1960s, a perfect storm of countercultural revolutions, landmark legal decisions, and artistic liberation was poised to completely demolish the old Hollywood order. The cinematic depiction of marriage was about to step out of the manicured, drug-sedated suburbs and enter a raw, visceral territory where characters would no longer speak in coded metaphors or suffer mandatory narrative punishments. How did filmmakers respond when the chains of the production code were finally shattered, allowing them to broadcast the absolute, unfiltered ferocity of a marital civil war directly to a changing nation? As we advance into the next phase of this masterclass, we will confront the explosive, groundbreaking arrival of 1960s realism, analyzing the devastating psychological warfare of features that changed the cultural conversation around divorce forever. The decade of the 1960s began with a systematic shattering of the artificial domestic consensus that had defined the post-war era. The sweeping social cataclysms of the counterculture, the rapid acceleration of the feminist movement, the widespread availability of oral contraceptives, and the profound political disillusionment of the Vietnam War era combined to make the sanitized nuclear family structures of 1950s cinema look completely obsolete and fundamentally dishonest. Audiences, particularly the burgeoning youth demographic, actively rejected the neatly packaged, moralistic resolutions that traditional Hollywood studios had spent decades manufacturing. At the same time, the old guard of the Production Code Administration was rapidly aging out, losing both its moral authority and its economic teeth. Hollywood studios were hemorrhaging millions of dollars to independent productions and unrated foreign imports from European master directors who depicted adult relationships with an uncompromised, devastating psychological honesty. In 1966, Jack Valenti assumed the presidency of the Motion Picture Association of America and immediately recognized that the existing censorship strictures were completely untenable in a modernized marketplace. The step-by-step dismantle of the production code accelerated to a fever pitch as major studio releases began openly defying the censors, refusing to cut scenes or alter scripts to satisfy archaic moral guidelines. Screenwriters and directors were no longer willing to accept the mandatory requirement that a divorce journey must culminate in tragedy, loneliness, or social ruin. Instead, they demanded the artistic autonomy to present the dissolution of a marriage as an authentic, raw, and necessary reflection of modern psychological reality. A definitive case study of this monumental transition is Mike Nichols' landmark 1966 film adaptation of Edward Albee's play, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Starring Richard Burton as George, a cynical, stagnant history professor, and Elizabeth Taylor as Martha, the volatile, deeply frustrated daughter of the college president. The film stands as an absolute turning point in cinematic history. The entire narrative unfolds over the course of a single, alcohol-soaked night inside their cluttered, claustrophobic campus home, where they host a younger faculty couple for after-hours drinks. Nichols strips away every ounce of traditional Hollywood glamour and lighting sophistication. The camera utilizes jarring, handheld movements, aggressive close-ups, and stark, high-contrast black-and-white cinematography to trap the audience directly inside a domestic arena of unprecedented psychological violence. George and Martha do not communicate through the polite, coded metaphors of 1950s melodramas or the rapid, rhythmic wit of 1930s screwball comedies. They use raw, profane, and deeply vitriolic language to systematically eviscerate one another's deepest insecurities, regrets, and physical failures. The narrative structure of the film progresses relentlessly through a series of cruel, highly coordinated psychological games orchestrated by the couple, explicitly titled Humiliate the Host, Get the Guests, and Hump the Host. Every single sequence is designed to strip away the protective illusions holding their catastrophic marriage together. The ultimate devastating revelation that their entire shared history, including the existence of their deeply cherished son, is a completely fabricated psychological delusion served as a profound, disturbing metaphor for the artificial myths surrounding the traditional American family structure. Warner Brothers fought the Production Code Administration with immense corporate ferocity to release the film without a single dialogue cut. The potential outcomes of a total nationwide ban were mitigated when the studio agreed to a historic, unprecedented compromise. The film would be distributed with a strict marketing warning labeling it for mature audiences only. This specific decision effectively shattered the structural authority of the old censorship model, serving as the direct catalyst for the official implementation of the MPAA alphabet rating system in 1968. Imagine if a contemporary American citizen in the current year 2026 named Christopher experienced a profound relationship breakdown. Christopher could easily access an online platform, stream a specialized podcast, or read thousands of highly nuanced digital articles regarding emotional trauma, narcissistic cycles, and conscious uncoupling. For Christopher in 2026, the vocabulary of deep psychological dissection and the public airing of relationship grievances is entirely standardized, normalized, and integrated into daily life. Now, contrast Christopher's reality with the absolute cultural shock experienced by an ordinary theatergoer in the summer of 1966. Walking into a grand movie palace and hearing a prominent Hollywood husband and wife openly declare their mutual hatred, trade raw insults, and expose the absolute rot of a 20-year marriage was an unprecedented societal thunderbolt. Cinema was no longer serving as a safe, idealized escape. It had transformed into an uncompromised mirror, reflecting the real-world domestic fractures occurring in millions of households across the United States. While Nichols explored the dark, tragic depths of marital decay, director Norman Lear and screenwriter Robert Kaufman turned their sharp, analytical lens toward the administrative, economic, and logistical machinery of separation in the 1967 satirical comedy drama, Divorcee American Style. Starring Dick Van Dyke as Richard Harmon and Debbie Reynolds as Barbara Harmon, the film charts the breakdown of an affluent, upper-middle-class suburban marriage. Unlike previous cinematic eras that treated divorce as a criminal conspiracy or a whimsical misunderstanding, this film treats the dissolution of a relationship as a highly calculated, deeply cynical corporate industry. The narrative meticulously tracks the step-by-step logistics of the separation process. The cold, highly manipulative consultations with competitive matrimonial attorneys who deliberately escalate conflicts to increase their billable hours, the complex financial calculations of alimony payments that leave Richard broke and living in a dingy apartment, and the intense social fragmentation that occurs as lifelong friends feel forced to choose sides. The film exposes a highly specific historical trend of the late 1960s, the realization that the fault-based legal framework turned the divorce journey into an adversarial war where nobody won except the legal system itself. Richard's divorced friends introduce him to an organized, subterranean network of ex-husbands who actively plot to marry off their ex-wives to other men simply to rid themselves of the crushing, court-mandated burden of alimony. The film utilizes a bright, flat, almost clinical visual style that purposefully strips away the high-society romance of the past, presenting the entire journey as a cold restructuring of human emotion driven by economic variables. The ending is deliberately ambivalent, showing the couple tentatively reuniting not out of renewed romantic love, but out of absolute systemic exhaustion and financial terror, providing a scathing critique of the societal structures that trapped individuals in dead relationships. These major cinematic shifts directly mirrored and fueled a massive groundswell in public opinion and legislative reform across the United States. Historical trends indicate that by the late 1960s, the traditional fault-based system was widely recognized by sociologists, legal scholars, and the general public as an archaic, corrupt framework that systematically forced couples to commit perjury, invent fake grievances, or stage fraudulent acts of infidelity, just to secure a legal exit from their marriages. The raw psychological realism of features like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and the sharp economic critiques of Divorcee American Style, normalized the idea that forcing incompatible individuals to remain legally bound was inherently destructive to individual mental health and overall social stability. This rapid cultural shift culminated directly in 1969, when Governor Ronald Reagan signed the landmark California Family Law Act, which established the first true no-fault divorce system in the country, completely eliminating the requirement to prove marital misconduct and permanently reshaping the landscape of American family law. With the official arrival of no-fault legislation and the total erasure of the old censorship codes, Hollywood screenwriters were suddenly granted absolute, unregulated freedom to explore the aftermath of this legal and social revolution. The 1970s would usher in a golden age of uncompromised, gritty relationship dramas that moved past the act of separation itself to investigate the brutal, real-world battlefields of child custody, parental alienation, and the painful rebuilding of personal identity from the ashes of a broken home. How did filmmakers navigate this raw new landscape when the law finally made it easy to walk away, but human emotion made it impossibly complex to let go? As we move into the next phase of this masterclass, we will enter the unflinching cinematic world of the 1970s, analyzing the monumental Oscar-winning cultural touchstone that put the entire American audience in the middle of a devastating custody war. The 1970s brought an unprecedented wave of legal and cultural shifts that forced American cinema to move past the simple act of marital separation and confront the devastating, unvarnished aftermath of a family's dissolution. With the widespread adoption of no-fault divorce laws across the United States, the primary narrative tension in Hollywood films shifted. The central question was no longer whether a couple could legally break their vows, but rather how they would pick up the shattered pieces of their lives, navigate the cold machinery of the family court system, and fight for the custody of their children. This era demanded an entirely new cinematic language, one that stripped away the glossy distractions of the past to deliver an unflinching look at the emotional and structural adjustments required by a changing society. The absolute cultural touchstone of this cinematic movement arrived in 1979 with Robert Benton's masterpiece, Kramer vs. Kramer. This film did not just capture a historical trend. It defined a generation's understanding of parental rights, gender role reversals, and the psychological trauma inflicted on children caught in the crossfire of a marital civil war. The narrative case study begins with an immediate, high-stakes rupture. Joanna Kramer, played with extraordinary vulnerability by Meryl Streep, informs her workaholic husband, Ted, played by Dustin Hoffman, that she is leaving him and their young son, Billy. The opening scene utilizes tight framing and low-key lighting to emphasize Joanna's profound sense of erasure within her own home. She has spent years suppressing her own identity, ambitions, and mental health to satisfy the rigid societal expectations of mid-century motherhood, and her departure is framed not as an act of malice, but as a desperate, survival-driven pursuit of self-actualization. What follows is a meticulous step-by-step examination of a father's forced evolution. Ted Kramer, an ambitious advertising executive who previously viewed his domestic responsibilities as a secondary concern, is suddenly thrust into the role of a primary caregiver. Benton masterfully uses the routine elements of daily life to measure Ted's psychological transformation. A defining visual metric in the film is the preparation of French toast. In the immediate aftermath of Joanna's departure, the breakfast sequence is a chaotic, frustrating disaster, with Ted burning the food, shattering glass, and screaming in front of his terrified son. This scene serves as a brilliant metaphor for the structural collapse of the traditional patriarchal household. However, as the narrative progresses, a parallel breakfast sequence is introduced. Months later, we see Ted and Billy working in flawless, silent synchronization, effortlessly preparing the same meal. The chaos has been replaced by a deep, authentic bond, demonstrating that the potential outcomes of a family transition can include profound personal growth and the cultivation of genuine emotional intimacy. Just as Ted and Billy establish their new domestic equilibrium, the narrative engine accelerates with the sudden return of Joanna, who has spent her time in California undergoing intensive therapy and securing a high-paying corporate position. She enters the legal arena to claim sole custody of her son, igniting a scorched-earth courtroom battle that exposes the inherent flaws of the adversarial American legal apparatus. The second half of Kramer vs. Kramer functions as a clinical dissection of how family law can weaponize personal history. High-priced attorneys systematically distort the characters' private vulnerabilities into malicious legal arguments. Ted's professional sacrifices are twisted into evidence of parental neglect, while Joanna's past mental health crises are paraded through the courtroom to brand her as an unstable, unfit mother. The film highlights a major historical trend of the late 1970s, the gradual dismantling of the tender years doctrine, a legal presumption that naturally awarded custody of young children to mothers, forcing courts to confront the reality that fathers could be equally capable of providing nurturing primary care. Imagine if an average American citizen in the current year 2026 named Mark went through a modern parental separation. For Mark in 2026, the entire process would be heavily mediated by structured, institutionalized guidelines designed to minimize conflict. Mark and his ex-spouse would likely engage in collaborative family law practices, utilize sophisticated digital scheduling applications to coordinate shared parenting time, and follow standard child support calculators that remove the elements of personal vindictiveness from the financial equation. Joint legal and physical custody would be the default assumption, viewed by society as the most stable framework for the child's development. But for an audience member sitting in a movie theater in 1979, the winner-take-all, scorched earth custody battle depicted in the film was a terrifyingly accurate reflection of a legal system that forced parents to completely destroy each other's reputations just to maintain a relationship with their offspring. To capture the raw, unvarnished reality of this domestic warfare, cinematographer Nestor Almendros abandoned traditional Hollywood lighting schemes. He utilized naturalistic, soft light sources and shot on location in actual New York City apartments, courtrooms, and restaurants. This aesthetic choice stripped the film of any cinematic artifice, making the viewer feel like an intrusive witness to a private family tragedy. Furthermore, the film conspicuously lacks a traditional, melodramatic orchestral score. Instead, Benton incorporates the structured, precise Baroque music of Antonio Vivaldi. This musical choice provides a striking, ironic contrast to the emotional chaos unfolding on screen, suggesting that the rigid, orderly structures of society and law are completely incapable of containing or resolving the messy, unpredictable realities of human grief and love. To add even more depth to our understanding of the 1970s cinematic landscape, we must contrast this masculine narrative of adaptation with another crucial case study from the same era. Paul Mazursky's 1978 comedy drama, An Unmarried Woman, starring Jill Clayburgh as Erica Benton. While Kramer vs. Kramer focused heavily on the father's redemption arc, Mazursky's film tracks the step-by-step emotional and financial rehabilitation of a wealthy Manhattan woman, whose husband suddenly abandons her after critical years of marriage for a younger partner. The film is structurally vital because it documents the rising social reality of therapy, consciousness-raising groups, and the reclamation of female sexual autonomy in the wake of a matrimonial collapse. Erica's journey is visualized through her physical navigation of the city. She moves from the restrictive, insular spaces of her shared marital apartment out into the expansive, chaotic streets of New York, slowly establishing her identity as an independent entity who does not require a marital contract to achieve societal validation. The cultural and commercial impact of these 1970s relationship dramas was monumental. Historical trends show that Kramer vs. Kramer became the highest-grossing film of 1979, outperforming massive action blockbusters and capturing 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Its success demonstrated that the American public possessed an immense, insatiable appetite for stories that validated their own private domestic struggles. These films actively altered the public discourse surrounding divorce, sparking nationwide debates in magazines, talk shows, and legal journals regarding the changing definitions of fatherhood, the rights of working mothers, and the psychological needs of children. They forced a conservative society to acknowledge that a broken home was not a moral failure, but a complex human landscape requiring empathy, legislative reform, and psychological nuance. As the 1970s drew to a close, cinema had successfully elevated the divorce journey into a profound, high-stakes exploration of human identity and societal transition. Filmmakers had proven that the end of a marriage was not the end of a story, but the beginning of a complex, ongoing process of negotiation and adaptation. But a new decade was on the horizon, and the socio-political climate of the United States was about to experience a sharp, conservative shift. The arrival of the 1980s would bring a powerful cultural backlash against the progressive ideals of the previous 20 years, accompanied by an era of rampant corporate materialism and high-stakes financial ambition. The quiet, naturalistic realism of the 1970s relationship drama would soon be overshadowed by a highly sensationalized, aggressive, and dark cinematic landscape. How did filmmakers adapt the depiction of marital breakdown when the stakes were raised from emotional custody battles to literal, high-budget wars of material attrition? As we advance into the next phase of this masterclass, we will enter the ruthless world of 1980s cinema, analyzing a dark, satirical masterpiece that transformed the home into a literal war zone, proving that when a modern marriage dissolves, the battlefield can become downright lethal. The transition into the 1980s completely re-engineered the American domestic landscape, trading the earnest, quiet, naturalistic introspection of the 1970s for an era characterized by hypermaterialism, corporate ambition, and the intense accumulation of luxury consumer goods. This was the decade of the yuppie, where personal identity was fundamentally fused with real estate, designer wardrobes, and high-end automotive status symbols. When a marriage dissolved in this socio-economic climate, the resulting legal and emotional battle was no longer just a private crisis of emotional incompatibility or a quiet negotiation over parental custody. Instead, the divorce journey became an aggressive, scorched-earth war of material attrition. The home, once idealized as a sanctuary of family unity, was reconceptualized by filmmakers as a physical asset, a corporate fortress, and ultimately, a literal zone of tactical combat. This profound cultural shift found its definitive dark case study in Danny DeVito's 1989 satirical masterpiece, The War of the Roses. Starring Michael Douglas as Oliver Rose, a wildly successful corporate attorney, and Kathleen Turner as Barbara Rose, an ambitious entrepreneur, the film tracks the step-by-step collapse of an affluent suburban marriage. The narrative begins by systematically documenting the historic trends of the era, showcasing the couple as they spend years meticulously purchasing, renovating, and decorating a massive, opulent multi-million-dollar mansion. For Barbara, the house is not merely a place to reside. It is the physical manifestation of her labor, her taste, and her gradual realization that she has completely fallen out of love with her self-absorbed husband. The true rupture occurs not because of a scandalous affair or physical cruelty, but due to a profound, chilling realization of emotional indifference. When Oliver suffers a health scare that he believes is a fatal heart attack, Barbara honestly confesses that his potential survival brings her no joy, triggering an immediate and absolute demand for a divorce. The structural brilliance of the film lies in how it utilizes the evolving landscape of matrimonial jurisprudence from the late 1980s to trap the characters in a physical prison of their own making. Under the legal frameworks governing property division at the time, specifically the principles of equitable distribution, both parties possessed a valid, colorable legal claim to the shared matrimonial estate. Oliver's high-priced legal counsel, played by Danny DeVito himself, identifies a specific statutory loophole. Neither party can be legally compelled to vacate the residence while the divorce action is actively pending in the court system. Consequently, Oliver and Barbara both refuse to leave the mansion, out of absolute fear that abandoning the physical property would compromise their ultimate positioning in the final asset division. This legal deadlock converts the luxury home into a highly coordinated battlefield. DeVito utilizes widescreen compositions and deep-focus cinematography to transform the house into a character. The narrative progresses step by step through a series of escalating retaliations that systematically destroy the material trophies of their shared life. Oliver deliberately destroys Barbara's prized pickup truck by driving his luxury sports car directly over it. In response, Barbara manipulates the architectural mechanics of the house, trapping Oliver in a concealed sauna room until his health is severely compromised. The psychological warfare quickly bleeds into physical destruction during a legendary, horrific dinner party sequence where Barbara implies she has cooked Oliver's cherished pet, culminating in a chaotic, desperate final battle where the characters use tools, ropes, and furniture to physically tear the interior of the mansion apart. The film concludes with the literal and symbolic collapse of the massive crystal chandelier, crushing both characters beneath the weight of the material goods they refuse to relinquish. The potential outcomes of unchecked material greed are visualized as absolute, mutual annihilation. Imagine if an average American citizen in the current year 2026 named Linda experienced a profound relationship breakdown. For Linda in 2026, the entire process of asset split is highly computerized, streamlined, and mediated by forensic accounting algorithms. Linda can easily utilize specialized digital platforms to instantly value real estate, separate investment portfolios via automated mediation protocols, and liquidate shared physical property through transparent online marketplaces. For Linda in 2026, the dissolution of the matrimonial estate is treated as a logistical and financial transaction, an exercise in corporate restructuring designed to facilitate a rapid transition to independent living. Now, contrast Linda's digital reality with the absolute psychological obsession experienced by the characters in 1989. For that generation, the loss of the physical home was equated with the total erasure of the social and economic self. The film exposed the subterranean terror driving the materialist boom, showing that when the illusion of the perfect consumer family shattered, the objects of accumulation became weapons of absolute destruction. As the cinematic timeline transitioned into the 1990s, Hollywood altered its approach once again, moving away from the pitch-black, lethal satire of the late 1980s to investigate the postmodern, highly fragmented realities of the blended family structure. By the mid-1990s, Historical trends indicated that divorce was no longer viewed by the American public as an extraordinary anomaly or a shocking social catastrophe. Instead, it had become an entirely normalized, institutionalized stage of the American life cycle. The challenge for screenwriters and directors in this era was to explore how parents and children could construct a new visual and emotional vocabulary to survive the logistical realities of co-parenting across separate households. A monumental case study of this era is Chris Columbus's 1993 blockbuster comedy drama, Mrs. Doubtfire, featuring Robin Williams as Daniel Hillard and Sally Field as Miranda Hillard. While packaged as a high-concept, mainstream comedy, the film operates underneath its humorous premise as a deeply accurate, step-by-step documentation of the psychological trauma and surveillance associated with family court custody evaluations. Following a sudden, bitter separation initiated by Miranda's professional frustration, the judge grants sole temporary physical custody to the mother, restricting Daniel to highly limited, supervised weekend visitation rights due to his financial instability and lack of structured employment. The film meticulously visualizes the cold, institutional parameters of the 1990s legal system, introducing a stern court-appointed social worker who conducts unannounced home inspections to evaluate Daniel's fitness as a father. This extreme regulatory pressure drives the narrative engine, forcing Daniel to utilize his skills as a professional voice actor and makeup artist to disguise himself as an elderly British housekeeper, just to bypass the court-mandated custody restrictions and maintain daily contact with his children. Through the medium of comedy, the film highlighted a profound historical truth: the immense, agonizing lengths to which parents would go to circumvent a rigid legal apparatus that treated human relationships as cold administrative schedules. The film's final sequence was revolutionary for its time, refusing to deliver a traditional Hollywood reconciliation, and instead showing the characters embracing a permanent, healthy co-parenting dynamic, validating the postmodern blended family as a legitimate structure to millions of viewers. By the close of the 20th century, American cinema had successfully deconstructed every single facet of the marital contract, moving from the enforced silence and moral punishments of the early silent era to the raw, unregulated corporate warfare of the late modern age. Filmmakers had successfully forced the public to acknowledge that the journey through divorce was a defining, indelible thread in the fabric of the American experience. But as the world stood on the precipice of the 21st century, a new unprecedented digital revolution was preparing to completely rewrite the mechanics of human intimacy, litigation, and communication. The arrival of the internet, social media networks, and smartphone technology was about to transform the divorce journey into a highly public, algorithmically tracked phenomenon, altering how people met, how they parted, and how their heartbreaks were archived for eternity. How did Hollywood storytellers adapt when the battlefield of marriage moved off the widescreen canvas and into the palm of your hand? What happens when the raw, unfiltered emotional warfare of the past is translated into the clinical, hyperconnected landscape of contemporary indie cinema? As we advance into the 10th and final phase of this masterclass series, we will confront the modern era, analyzing the definitive 21st century masterpieces that capture the absolute, heartbreaking truth of love and loss in our digital age. The modern era of cinema has consolidated these historical trends, transforming the depiction of the divorce journey into a hyper-realistic, emotionally fluid, and deeply institutionalized experience that mirrors the complex psychological landscape of the 21st century. As the physical and digital realities of contemporary life merged, filmmakers abandoned the highly stylized metaphors of the past to look directly at the administrative and existential exhaustion of decoupling in a hyper-connected world. Cinema no longer needed to hide behind the comedic subversion of the screwball era, or the lethal shadows of film noir to critique the marital contract. Instead, 21st century indie dramas and mainstream features treated the dissolution of a relationship as a bureaucratic corporate restructuring of the soul, where the ultimate enemy is not a villainous spouse, but the cold, automated momentum of the legal industry itself. A definitive case study of this postmodern cinematic shift is Noah Baumbach's 2019 masterpiece, Marriage Story. The film operates as a meticulous step-by-step autopsy of a contemporary bicoastal divorce, tracking the separation of Charlie Barber, a brilliant New York theater director, and Nicole Barber, a successful television actress. The narrative opens with an intentional subversion of audience expectations, utilizing a montage of warm, deeply intimate voiceovers where each character details exactly what they love about the other. This sequence establishes a profound historical evolution. In the modern era, Divorce does not require an underlying current of hatred or spectacular betrayal to be justified. Instead, the narrative validates the pursuit of individual geographic and professional autonomy as a completely legitimate reason to dismantle a nuclear family structure. The true structural brilliance of Marriage Story lies in its clinical exposure of how the contemporary family law apparatus systematically hijacks human emotion. Charlie and Nicole initially make a mutual, earnest agreement to navigate their separation amicably through private mediation, explicitly wishing to avoid the financial and psychological carnage of a traditional courtroom battle. However, the moment Nicole hires a high-powered Los Angeles family attorney, played with predatory elegance by Laura Dern, the administrative machinery takes complete control of their lives. Baumbach illustrates how the legal system forces the characters into adversarial positions against their will. The private, nuanced vulnerabilities they shared during their marriage are instantly weaponized by their respective legal teams. The film progresses through a series of increasingly sterile, brightly lit corporate conference rooms where lawyers debate custody schedules and asset allocations with cold mathematical precision. The emotional climax occurs in an uncut, explosive argument inside Charlie's temporary apartment, where the characters scream profane, deeply buried resentments that they were forbidden from expressing in the formal courtroom environment. Baumbach uses flat, naturalistic digital lighting and restrictive midshots to emphasize that the characters are completely trapped by the financial and logistical realities of their choices. By showing that the legal fees are actively depleting the financial assets originally set aside for their son's college education, the film highlights a devastating case study of modern institutionalization. The process of getting a divorce can become an automated machine that consumes the very future it claims to protect. Imagine if an average American citizen in the current year 2026, named Amanda, decided to terminate her marriage. For Amanda in 2026, the primary arena of her divorce journey would not just be a physical courtroom or a lawyer's office, but the vast, indelible digital archive of her shared life. Amanda would have to navigate the agonizing process of separating shared cloud storage accounts, decoupling smart home subscription ecosystems, and untangling algorithmically generated memory streams that continuously broadcast images of past marital bliss directly to her smartphone. Her text message history, email exchanges, and social media interactions would be systematically downloaded, cataloged, and entered into a legal database as digital exhibits demonstrating parental fitness or hidden expenditures. For Amanda in 2026, the emotional fallout of a relationship ending is amplified exponentially by the permanent, unerasable digital footprint of her past, making the psychological act of letting go almost entirely impossible in a culture that never forgets. Modern cinema has captured this digital claustrophobia by altering its visual grammar, frequently framing characters against the cold, blue glow of laptop screens and mobile devices, as they read legal updates or track their ex-spouse's reconstructed single lives online. This contemporary aesthetic stands in stark contrast to the historical trends we have investigated across this entire masterclass series. When we trace the unbroken line from Cecil B. DeMille's silent features in 1918 to the raw, unfiltered streaming dramas of the 21st century, we witness the complete evolution of the American collective consciousness regarding human intimacy and personal freedom. Early U.S. cinema began in an era of enforced silence and rigid moral absolute, where filmmakers had to invent highly sophisticated narrative loopholes, like the comedy of remarriage, simply to show a couple exploring the potential outcomes of a separation without facing total censorship. The pre-code talkies of the early 1930s briefly shattered these barriers, using sharp dialogue to expose the hypocritical gender double standards embedded in the law, before the iron fist of the Production Code Administration forced the industry into decades of coded metaphors, hyper-melodramatic sedation, and the lethal, cautionary tales of film noir. The cultural explosions of the late 1960s finally demolished the old censorship structures, giving rise to an era of uncompromised psychological realism that directly fueled the legislative revolution of no-fault divorce. The 1970s and 1980s then pushed the narrative into the gritty realities of custody wars and the destructive nature of material greed, laying the groundwork for the highly normalized, postmodern blended family narratives of the late 20th century. Through this exhaustive historical investigation, you have acquired the sophisticated analytical tools necessary to understand that the media you consume every single day is never neutral. The films, television series, and digital narratives that shape our contemporary understanding of romance, heartbreak, and personal autonomy are the direct products of over a century of continuous social engineering, creative resistance, and institutional warfare. Early Hollywood filmmakers were the original architects who took a deeply stigmatized, legally prohibitive social taboo and systematically repackaged it as the ultimate modern journey toward self-actualization, personal refinement, and individual liberty. By understanding the historical trends, the structural roadblocks, and the creative breakthroughs that define the evolution of the cinematic divorce journey, you can now look past the surface level of modern entertainment. You can decode the hidden visual cues, the deliberate narrative formulas, and the ideological biases that continue to influence how we view the life cycle of human relationships. Cinema has never merely reflected the American family, it has actively written the script for its continuous reinvention. But the evolution of cinematic storytelling did not stop with the domestic sphere. As Hollywood mastered the art of deconstructing the private home, it simultaneously turned its massive, highly influential lens toward the ultimate arena of public power, systemic manipulation, and global influence. How did the early pioneers of the silver screen transition from engineering our private romantic expectations to completely manufacturing our trust, our fears, and our compliance within the high-stakes world of political propaganda and corporate warfare? As we prepare to turn the page on human intimacy and step into a dark, thrilling new landscape of cultural control, we must look at the terrifying mechanics behind the next great cinematic illusion.